Welcome to the Healing Pain Podcast with Dr. Joe Tatta. Each week, we interview top experts in physical therapy, pain science, and integrative pain care. You'll learn the most up-to-date information for treating and reversing persistent pain. This podcast is for educational purposes only and not intended to be used as personalized medical advice. And now, here's your host, Dr. Joe Tatta.
Hey there, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of the Healing Pain Podcast, the show where we explore the dynamic world of chronic pain, neuroscience, physical therapy, and the opportunities for transforming how pain care is delivered. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Tatta, CEO of the Integrative Pain Science Institute, where we train physical therapists and other practitioners on integrative whole-person pain care. Today, we have a truly remarkable guest joining us to dive deep into the evolving world of physical therapy. Our guest is a distinguished researcher and professor, and a visionary whose work has ignited important conversations within the profession. Dr. Andrew Guccione holds a doctorate degree in physical therapy, a PhD, and is a fellow of the American Physical Therapy Association and a true luminary in our field. He joins us to explore ideas that challenge the traditional impairment-based as well as movement-based paradigms that are common in physical therapy and rehabilitation. We'll be delving into some intriguing questions that are reshaping the way that we think about movement, pain, as well as rehabilitation. On today's episode, Dr. Guccione tackles the tough questions that many of us are considering, such as, is the movement system really a system, or is it a theory with little clinical application? Should we move beyond impairment-based paradigms as physical therapists? Are we ready to embrace a more holistic approach to rehabilitation and pain management? And finally, how changing paradigms transform the way we assess as well as treat patients as physical therapists. So whether you're a seasoned physical therapist or simply curious about the ever-evolving world of movement science, this episode promises to expand your horizons and challenge some of your assumptions. Without further ado, let's dive into this enlightening conversation about movement with Dr. Andrew Guccione. Hey there, Andrew. Thanks for joining me on this week's podcast.
Thanks, Joe, for having me. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
I am too. The movement system, we're going to be talking a lot about movement today, and the movement system is part of that. We've covered it a couple times on the evolution of the Healing Pain podcast, probably most recently, maybe about 3 months ago. People can go back and find the episode with Shirley Sarman. As many know, she kind of like coined the idea of the movement system. And our profession has, I think, embraced it in some ways. And then there have been people within our profession who have kind of brought up maybe some challenges or problems around it. And like all theories, right, we kind of test them and we bounce them back and forth. And, we juggle them around a little bit, try them out and see how it goes. I know movement has been a big part of your career. You've had a very long, illustrious career. You're now a professor emeritus. But kind of give us a snapshot into how you've tackled movement as a physical therapist and researcher over your career.
Okay. Well, I've been a PT. This is my 45th year as a PT. So I feel somewhat ancient. I can talk about the latter part of the 20th century because I was actually there in the middle of it, and I wasn't a teenager. I was actually a professional. So my interest in movement started really with the initial ideas about diagnosis. In the mid-1980s, the three big names were Jules Rothstein, Shirley Sarman, and Steve Rose, all talking about diagnosis, and I got kind of wrapped up in that. And in fact, I guess I was part of the early PT is about movement thrust, very much involved in the House of Delegates. That's a huge part of my background, including being Speaker of the House for 4 years in the 90s. But as those motions, do PTs diagnose? What is diagnosis in PT? What is our body of knowledge in PT? That was a very big question in the late 70s and then through the 80s and almost to the 90s. And so there was really the development of this idea that somehow movement was central. However, I started to grow away from that probably by the mid-90s. In 1991, I guess it was, I published a paper about the relationship between impairment and function, because we were very impairment-based. And I suggested that the essence of PT diagnosis was going to be somehow in the relationship between we're asking basically, how are these impairments causing this functional deficit? And I got that actually through a route in sociology, through Sad Nagy and the Nagy model, which was later supplanted by the International Classification of Function, but it was a predominant model in medical sociology in the 80s and 90s. For beginning to explain the relationships. He put out pathology, impairment, function, and then disability. That was the initial model, which over time progressed into body structures, functions, activity and participation. So I think I was very engaged in that for part of my career. I was intimately involved as an observer on the development of the ICF model and the problems that that's had. And I was a very active delegate about movement. However, somewhere along the line in the 90s, after I wrote that paper, which, by the way, I've pretty much disavowed and said I was wrong. I did that publicly in 2010 as part of my Macmillan lecture, kind of saying, don't listen to me anymore. And I thought it was quite important to admit that publicly, because we don't often criticize our theories or return to them. I mean, obviously, I thought I was right when I said it, and I think I was as right as I could be at the time, given what we knew, what was in the literature, how people were talking about it. I don't think that's a very productive way of talking about it now. So somewhere in the mid 90s, I started saying, I think there are a few more steps here. Mm-hmm. Okay. And, after scratching my head, I realized that the ICF actually gave us a solution, even though the ICF didn't necessarily realize that, because they really developed a hierarchy of body structure and function impairment. And then they talk about actions. And action is really the realm of movement, its relationship to tasks that you have to accomplish in order to engage successfully in activity, right? And I went, it was one of those aha moments. I've had two aha moments. One was the first time I can remember where I was in a library and I read Sad Nagy and I went, holy Hannah, this is it. This suddenly structures what we're trying to do. And the second one was the ICF were my missing links. So I went, there are the intermediate steps, because we know that people with impairment do function, and some of them function so well you don't even realize they have impairments, right? And one of our big successes is we take people with tremendous impairment and we figure it out, right? And they function beautifully. That's why people come to us. So actions and tasks. When I focused on that and started researching what I should have known all along, and how the brain recognizes actions. It doesn't recognize muscles. It doesn't recognize body parts. And also began to look at how children develop, what happens as they begin to learn how to manipulate an environment, how environments impact development. I went, oh, there's a lot more going on here. And I think now that was not like, it was like 1 year. And then by the next year, I had it all figured out. Quite frankly, I think it was about 15 years of swirling in my head. And by the time I came to the Macmillan lecture to announce that I got it wrong, part of what I suggested there was that while movement was central, movement system was not really our rubric. human performance is our rubric, because everything we do, whether it's the level of impairment, action, or task, is to improve human performance. And I favor that. I'm sure some of your listeners who are very much into wellness and prevention, as you are, it's very hard to make this very strong argument about why we should be involved in wellness and prevention when we're the kings and queens of impairment. Mm-hmm. And I think as I read, I became more and more convinced that the literature, particularly in movement science, was not speaking about a single movement system. In fact, if you Google movement system, you mostly come up with PT. And there is talk of movement systems because movement turns out to have a generic quality, but it has also a very highly idiosyncratic quality. And I think once we get into why that is, for me, it opens up a huge realm of possibilities for how we intervene for people who have impairment, but also then how we help people who just want their movement to be better, like athletes, like healthy people who are seeking our services, how we can work with that without feeling like, am I still a PT when I'm doing this? The answer is yes. The problem is, if you confine PT and define it so narrowly as movement impairments, wow, you're just cutting us out of a whole bunch of really good stuff and really important things that people will end up going to seek other kinds of movement experts to do. And they're doing that now. So is that getting us started?
It's an amazing start. I thank you for laying out this, really red carpet to a big conversation. I really appreciate the historical perspective that you brought to the conversation that also ties in your career and your trajectory. And I think I've recorded 360 podcasts now, something like that. And I don't think anyone has come on and said, I published a paper, I had a theory, and eventually I said I was wrong. And I, as I listen to you, I don't think it's that you were necessarily wrong. I think that science evolved and then you said, let's evolve with it. And some people said, well, hold on, like we have this theory that we're building out. Like we all latched onto this. Now you're asking me to modify and change the theory. And I think that's what a good scientist does. I think that's what a good practitioner does.
Right. Well, I think we've cut ourselves off from developments that really impact how we think. There are a number of cognitive psychologists who have insights that are very important. There are a number of movement scientists who have insights, and they don't come at it from a therapeutic perspective necessarily. That's where we can really contribute to them.
Right. They're talking about mechanisms, basically, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. We take the mechanisms and say, here's how you take this theory and the mechanism and apply it to human performance. And I want to make sure that we define human performance, because when people hear the word performance, they think, oh, sport performance, or maybe, dance performance. But how does performance map across the human ability spectrum?
Well, I think that some of our OT colleagues would have less problem with the notion of ADL performance than we did.
Yeah.
We have been reluctant to see how even our sort of closest professional siblings like OTs and speech therapists begin to think about their work. ADL is a performance, okay? Getting up, getting dressed, doing daily hygiene. That's all performance. It involves movement. It involves selecting actions, or maybe they're so embedded in our routines that we just do things. We do, all of us who drive to work and wonder how we got there safely because we don't pay attention. So some things are very embedded in our psyches. But it's all a performance. Okay, it all puts a biomechanical and bioenergetic demand on our human bodies, and we respond to those demands a lot through movement. And so, in that sense, I really believe in the primacy of movement to what we're concerned about. I'm worried that we don't think of it quite as broadly and as deeply as we should, and allow ourselves to be informed outside of the PT literature with how people are doing things, because I think they have some real insights.
So you're saying that the idea of a movement system initially was a good idea, but it was too narrow for the populations of people that we really see now. And it sounds like along your path somewhere, you said, let's bring things in from motor learning. Let's bring things in from behavioral therapy. Let's bring things in from neuroscience. Let's bring things in from embodiment and from psychology. All these different aspects, biomechanics. Let's bring all that in to start to support the model in a way that is potentially more useful.
Absolutely. I should mention, it's particularly important that a lot of this stuff was being circulated through the House of Delegates, which is a political body. Okay. The movement as the identity is really a political argument. It's not a scientific argument. And some of that, I think, was a false assertion, although I appreciate it for where we were in the 1980s. We needed a system in order to compete with doctors, because competition with doctors and being accepted by doctors was really big in the 80s. And I'd like to think we're so beyond that, we're so over that, being a physician extender is not my favorite way of describing what we do, or a role that I think many of us should aspire to. We are our own thing, and doctors and other professionals either accept us or they don't. And, you don't run your race by looking at somebody else. You run your own race. And I think we're generally there, although every once in a while we sort of get caught up in doctors don't love us, the public doesn't love us, nobody knows what we do. And frankly, that's not true. And certainly if any of your patients leave you and don't know what PT is, that's the real problem.
Yeah. Because the data doesn't support that the public doesn't like physical therapy.
Oh, no, they love us.
Overwhelmingly, they love, once we can get someone through our doors, they love us.
Interestingly, I know they have done some background work, and movement system does not communicate to the public at all. So this thing that was supposed to be our key identity isn't quite doing the trick. Movement does. I think we got a good thing going, because when people say I have trouble moving, maybe I need a physical therapist. Or I was having trouble, moving, and my knee was hurting, and now I can do fine because I had this great physical therapist. That's right where we want the public to be. It's flexible. It allows them to contextualize what they experience relative to a very distinct problem. We also don't want the prevention and wellness, the person who says, I don't want to be decrepit when I'm really old. Okay. And I'm doing okay now. How do I keep it there? Or how do I get it a little bit better? Or, so many senior activity, all the people playing pickleball. Mm-hmm. Okay. All those injuries that are resulting from pickleball, but look at where they are and how we could help them get better, not only over their impairments, but I think there are even things that we do that would improve their pickleball if we did it in a certain way.
Right. So, for example, it hurts when I move, resonates. I'm stiff when I move, or I can't move because I'm stiff, resonates. I'm having trouble completing a certain activity, fill in the blank, resonates. And then there are things more recently that we've started to look at, things like I notice when I move, it improves my mood.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Even that really falls squarely within our scope of practice.
Absolutely. And that's not just a psychological trick, that there is a physiological basis for that. And there's a lot of, one of the things I think about is what is our biopsychosocial model and whether we have one or not. And I think that we have this thing, oh yeah, we're biopsychosocial, meaning have a lot of biology, biomechanics, bioenergetics, anything starts with bio is us. Okay. And then there's psych. So somebody has a mood or they have anxiety or depression, and we kind of leave it at that. And we regard them as modulators. Oh, they don't, do this because they're depressed or they're anxious, et cetera, et cetera. Talk a little bit about fear avoidance and whatever. And then social usually means race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. And that is important, particularly relative to reimbursement. But we say we have a biopsychosocial model, and then we really kind of go back to bio. Mm-hmm. But if we thought about that as physical, psychological, and social health status, particularly in the psych, there's attention, memory, and executive function. And if you think you mentioned the things that hurt. What about I move slow? Okay, I just can't move. I get confused when I have to move. I'm uncertain of myself. I don't anticipate things. Those are hardcore physiological, psychological function. Okay. I think like people mood and depressed, it's not this little airy kind of halo foam around somebody's head. There are real things happening, like with neurotransmitters. Mm-hmm. Okay. Duh. Do neurotranslators relate to movement? I hope so. So we could really craft, I think, if we spent the time thinking about this, how the bio and the psych really begin to connect in very physiological ways. So we can have a great deal of comfort with it, okay? Because we like that physiology stuff. And a lot of it is physiological. And we have the ability to manipulate it because we can manipulate one side of that equation very well, actually, it turns out. Exercising muscle releases all sorts of proteins into the body. And guess what? They travel to the brain. That to me is very exciting and almost like a new it should be an old frontier. And in some ways it is, but I don't think we've recognized when we've been traversing that territory. So it's going to appear very new, but I think it's very exciting, actually.
I do too. And I, just touching on the biopsychosocial model, I don't think that we have or use a biopsychosocial model in physical therapy. I think it's an underpinning theory that now in programs people learn, and people are acutely aware of it as this like zeitgeist on like social media. But the truth is, if you walked into a PT clinic in Main Street America, would you really receive a biopsychosocial evaluation? The answer is probably no. And I have gone on record with that, publishing Prism and PTJ.
Right.
Kind of wrote this new model to say like the biopsychosocial model was a wonderful thing when it existed or was created or developed many, many years ago. But as, a profession, we should start to take that and evolve things. And that was, there's been others. That was just kind of one evolution. I want to talk about, so you started talking about the psycho part of the biopsychosocial model. I have two questions about that. You brought up like anxiety and depression, and PTs have been somewhat good of like latching on and saying, yes, the reason why pain is persisting is because these patients have anxiety and depression, right? Which it's kind of weird because one, it begs the question, can we diagnose a mental health condition in a physical health context? 3, we really should change the terminology and say people are having depressive and anxiety symptoms, not that they have anxiety and depression. I think people do that specifically because they went to school in an impairment model. So it's easy for them to say, I understand physical impairment. Oh, now I can identify mental impairment. And I think we do a disservice to ourselves in that sense. And then, so I answer that. And then I want to move on to the second part of what you were talking about.
Thank you. I think you gave a more nuanced appreciation of the words I was throwing around. I do think we do have to be careful about what we are diagnosing and what we are putting a diagnostic label on. What I think is critical is to not see that symptomatology as just like dressing on the side, that it is part and parcel of what you see as movement. Okay. And it gets into an area that I think is critical and I don't see talked about too much, is that there is meaning involved in movement. Situations, and this is some of the social side. A situation you're in, whether it's a comfortable one, like I'm in my bathroom and I know where the toothpaste is and I know where my shave gear is, and I'm very comfortable, or I woke up in a hotel, all right, I'm in a hotel, where is the bathroom? That's part of that social environment, as well as I see a lot of friendly faces, or I think I'm walking into a situation where the vibe is just not real comfortable. Because we're engaged in goal-directed behavior, we are taking in cues from that environment. And that includes the things in that environment, the physical details. Is it a wood floor? Is it a rug? Is it bright? Is it dark? That's part of the social. And therefore, certain things have meaning. I would think in your pain audience, okay, you have a lot of the movements have meaning, negative meaning. If I move in a certain way, I'm afraid it's going to hurt. So therefore, I'm going to move in this way, which either adaptively or maladaptively, I have learned it as a way to control the situation. I think we forget, we're just like, we'll get up and walk. There is meaning, and it's not this, deep poetic meaning. It is how you interpret the task in front of you. What are you doing here?
Yeah.
And that has a lot to do with how you move. And then particularly, again, in the pain realm, where you're often dealing people who have trauma in their background, right? Psychological trauma. Mm-hmm. Are we anticipating that they would not move with a different sense of meaning for everything? How difficult it is for that person to enter an unknown circumstance or something that triggers a memory? I think where we miss the boat sometimes is recognizing the internal meaning. We talked about lived experience. They throw that. That's the meaning. Mm-hmm. So if we're supposed to help people with their lived experience and to optimize movement in the lived experience, how can you do that without getting into that level of biopsychosocial and meaning? Okay, what you attach to it. And again, that goes back to something very physiological. There's, probably don't have time to discuss it, but perception, action, coupling. It happens. Okay. And that's what we're fiddling with ultimately as PTs. How can we get a recoupling here so that it's pleasing, it's pain-free, it's exciting, it's rewarding? Mm-hmm. And then, if it's a reward, it taps into the reward system of the brain and you just want to do it more and more, So again, we're going at 100 miles an hour here, but there are dots to be connected all along the way.
Which I think you're doing beautifully. I mean, I think people come to the idea of like a biopsychosocial model or psychologically informed care, meaning that I'm going to learn a technique that I'm going to use that is then going to, one, take someone's pain away, or two, correct their impairment, right?
Right.
Which is as old as, you know, our profession is, and it's wrong actually, right? So
Yeah.
before when you mentioned that we work with attention, memory, and there was a third part I can't remember.
Executive function.
Right. Attention, memory, and executive function. Now, when you say we have a patient who has fibromyalgia and we have to create a plan that's going to work with attention, memory, and executive function, how would you do that as a physical therapist? I think most people would say, whoa, those three things, that's psychology. I don't work with executive function. But the idea of movement alone, like, and somehow I think connecting the dots, I think, is a really good word, because when you go back to DPT school or PT school, wherever you went, you know, when you learn about how the nervous system developed, and then you learn about how reflexes started as a child and how those reflexes were then suppressed as you learn more active movements, right? Voluntary movements. We work with memory.
Oh, yes.
But no one has elevated what we do to that level. They have kept it down on a very mechanical, take out the wrench and fix the impairment part. And I'm like, no, we're working with a lifetime of attention, memory, and executive function around how someone moves their body and what that means to them.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think if people were more tuned in to the motor learning literature, we've really have emphasized motor control, which is very important because it tells you a lot of, what hooks up with what and how things are connected and mechanisms. But when you look at motor learning, which you would think that the movement authorities would be looking at a lot, and yet it seems to be something that died out. I have a theory that people of my generation were taught by people who came out of physical education and adaptive physical education into PT. And I was the last generation that benefited from how they approach things. And what I've seen in the really rigorous motor learning literature, how someone attends, do they attend to their body too much or too little? And certainly with people who are in pain, okay, some of that is to get some of their attention out of their body. And actually, there's some evidence that says when you do that with all sorts of patients, they actually learn a motor routine better, that the self-referential part has got to go. Memory, you're learning, well, why belabor it? If it's learning, it's the memories involved.
That's right.
But executive function, the ability to adjust movement speed, okay, so you don't crush the potato chips as you grab for them, becomes very important. One of the things in my last position, when I was at George Mason, I had two different research programs over 11 years. One was in incomplete spinal cord injury, and the other one was with people with Parkinson's disease. And the ability, particularly in Parkinson's disease, to control the speed of a movement, it's either too slow or too fast, has to be worked with directly. When we worked with they were ambulatory individuals with incomplete spinal cord injury, and we worked on gait and walking. And one of the things they reported, and most of the people we saw had been treated by physical therapists at the top places in the country. I mean, if I told you where every household names, and everybody say, "Oh, that's got to be the best treatment." It was surprising to me how they told us nobody ever changed the speed. One of the things we would do is say, "Okay, we want you to walk as slow as you can. Now we want you to walk as fast as you can as part of the training. Now we want you to walk backwards," even though there's stuff in the literature that incontrovertibly says walking backwards helps people walk forwards. Okay. They said to us, the only time I ever walked backwards was as they told me as I got close to my wheelchair to take one step around and take one step back and sit. Mm-hmm. And nobody ever had them walk laterally or sideways. Mm-hmm. So again, the movement specialists are like as if everybody is walking only forward in a tunnel. Okay, a very, very straight lines. If there's a turn to the right, it's a sharp right turn. Well, how do you expect to make them safe and begin to anticipate, gee, there's a spill on the floor. I better not walk through it. I need to change my speed. I need to begin to alter my direction. To me, these are all the things that the movement profession should be like clicking through. And my patient report to me, N of one, okay, that isn't often happening. And that to me says we have a very naive, underdeveloped notion of movement, let alone of a movement system. And we need to begin to account for that because some of that idiosyncratic movement is actually adaptive and some of it is maladaptive. Mm-hmm. In fact, in our lab, we banned the word typical and normal. We talked about successful accomplishment of the task and less successful. So that's how we came up with in 2019, the optimization of movement, because there are all sorts of trade-offs that people are making. It's not always bad to lean in a particular direction if that reduces your pain while you're moving, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, but that's a violation of our principles because everybody knows you're supposed to be rigidly upright and you shouldn't be leaning and whatever. Well, yeah, if I'm standing still and you're taking my picture, but if I actually want to walk across the room and make a sandwich, I might need to lean a little, or I may need to baby, and is that babying a body part a good thing or a bad thing? That's where our expertise comes in to help take that apart. And maybe it's a good thing now, but if you're still babying it 6 weeks from now, that's a problem. Yeah. Or maybe we tried everything and the answer is it's okay, just lean off it a little. Put a little bit more of the weight on your left leg. That's the art of what we do.
And I think there's a lot of nuance there that is definitely a whole topic in and of itself. But we have to be a little cautious as professionals because if we rigidly adhere to this idea that a human being should not have an impairment, right? They should have this perfect way to move and this perfect posture and these all these other things that, are quote unquote textbook. And what that really comes down to is it's an ableist approach to human function. And yes. Ableism is a really difficult place for us to land in as a profession because right now we're seen as the profession that helps people with different types of bodies, right?
Right. Well, we've gotten into a very bad habit of regarding variability in movement as error. And it ignores error-based learning. Okay. And what we proposed in the 2019 paper with my colleagues, Brian Neville and Steve George, was that there are zones of tolerable variability, and as long as and obviously we couldn't say what those were. I'm sure people wanted to know, well, is it 10.9%, still within, or if you're at like 92.73%, do I need to worry? It's not like that, folks. it's much more like, are they generally getting it in a biomechanically efficient way under the circumstances? And is it the best use of their bioenergetic capabilities? One of the things, particularly from treating the neuro issues that we were facing, I think people forget how hard, and I'm sure you see this in the pain populations, how hard it is to move and conserve your energy, how exhausting it is to move against spasticity, how exhausting it is to move when your neurotransmitters are like tanking out. And what a bioenergetic strain that is. So some of that movement, maybe you can fix it, maybe you can't, but you have to accept that. And what else is going on? So saying, well, I want you to take that one perfect step, and then I want you to do another step, and they do. And then they go, I can't do this for a third step. It's okay. Okay. We're working within, we're trying to stretch the limits, but you're always working within the limits. And I think we have forgotten that those kinds of trade-offs, and particularly how bioenergetically hard it is for certain people with certain conditions, okay, or certain challenges to move. I mean, it's not like, pick up the pace. It's like they can't.
Yeah.
They just can't.
So we've kind of skipped along this subject or topic throughout the episode, but I haven't really asked you kind of the more direct question around it. As a profession, should we give up the idea of creating a diagnostic system around movement? Because as part of that movement system theory and kind of movement that happened from there was that people wanted to create specific diagnostic codes, if you will, around certain conditions, so to speak.
Well, what's happening is, and there's a lot of effort going into it, and I don't knock it, is we're getting slightly more nuanced impairment-based statements. We're really getting more refined impairment lists. The problem is, if movement consists, and we haven't talked about this really, there's the organism. That's us. That's the biological us and the psychological us. There's the task and there's the environment. So if you wanted to create a set of movement-oriented diagnostic classifications, you're at least talking a triaxial system, at least a triaxial. And I'll be honest, until we engaged to do this podcast, I wasn't thinking, with apologies, much about people with pain. And probably pain is a fourth axis, at least, because it's not everything is kaflooey. It's the organism attempting this task in this particular environment and with this sensory perception, okay, is more successful or less successful. So the problem is they're trying to develop this uniaxial system for something that I would say now, again, I'll correct myself from last week when I thought it was potentially triaxial. Pain is probably part of the picture, and that's a fourth axis. So again, now, have we ever heard of various axes used to develop diagnostic systems? Here's a hint, guys. It's already been done, and it works for a very large and very helpful profession. So I think looking at how psychologists have developed their diagnostic systems and along axes could be very, very helpful. We tried to give, and again, in the 2019 paper, we tried to give some sense of what does it mean to look at organism, what does it mean to look at task, and what does it mean to look at environment? What kinds of issues come up? We obviously didn't take it as far as in saying, and here we go. Here's the answer. Here's the triaxial system, or now quadriaxial system. because that really would have been well outside of what we were doing. But we were trying to say it's more complicated than this, but we can sort it out. And the diagnostic process becomes one of predictions, not necessarily of a firm, here you are, this is what you got, and a discussion, because what's happening between organism, task, and the environment keeps changing. It keeps changing within the moment, and then it changes across moments. So we got into the dynamical systems approach because that's really what's happening here. There are all these things in movement, and let's face it, if you are engaging someone who maybe has psychological symptoms of depression and they're doing well and they're feeling better, that's going to change the movement. It's all reiterative. Okay. And, obviously this is hurricane season, so it's a good time to talk about dynamical systems. Where's it going to land? Is it going to be a category 3 or is it going to go up to a category 5? Well, and then they tell you if it blows out to sea, it'll pick up more and it'll get pushed in by this, high pressure area and low pressure area. That's a lot of what we do. And we don't want to treat it that way. We want to treat it very linearly. Like, okay, here's your problem. Here's the one way that this problem gets treated, and here is your endpoint. And, you're in a very lucky situation if that's what all your patients look like. We're dealing with a very nonlinear system. And small inputs can have huge impacts. Large inputs can have nearly no impact. And I think that's our experience as therapists.
And so in some way, I think that's what makes what we do really interesting and exciting. Although I think you have to be the kind of person who finds interest and excitement in that. And again, I think the key is not trying to figure out what the problem is, but just looking as how does this human organism, how do all these systems converge together and impact what that person is experiencing? And then how do I insert myself into that container with my knowledge and my abilities and affect their system? Because really, it's almost two systems, like we're part of that system in some way.
You become part of the environment,
right,
and a set of stimuli to hopefully an adaptive response. I don't think we have to throw out everything we know about impairments. I think people get very worried because if there are impairments, you're not going to say, well, I could fix that, but I'm not going to. You are going to fix things. The question is, are you there as a fixer treater, which is, I think, where many of us end up? Or are you closer to a coach or a counselor, okay, who's trying to elicit a better performance? I'll tell you a quick story how I got into some of this stuff. I had 2 doctoral students who were not PTs, but had been college Division II athletes and had gone on to do some pro and semi-pro coaching. And I thought I had a real teaching moment because they were part of the spinal cord project. And they were really struggling with how we were viewing it. And I'll be honest, I was still viewing it from a very, couldn't lose my impairment orientation, even though I wanted to. I said to them when I thought was the teaching moment, I said, well, if walking were your sport, how would you train for it? Putting it in their idiom. And I thought, okay, so I've got the perfect training moment here. And 2 days later, they came back with a program they worked out. And I went, oh, gosh, this is brilliant. They basically deconstructed the gait cycle and said, if this were what we were training the athlete to do, here's how we would break it up. Here's how we would mix it up. Here's how we do all these things. And I went, my goodness, that is absolutely brilliant. And so the research programs evolved around a performance-based approach to treatment. And so it's much more the coach's idea is, and there are two kinds of coaches. The people who are in sports will come. There's the coach who says, you're going to pitch this way. You're going to quarterback this way. And then there's a person who says, okay, now that I see what you can do, here's how we can optimize the length of your arms. If we could all run like Usain Bolt, we probably would have figured it out by now. You have an extraordinary individual. You have incredibly perfect length of body parts as well. And you have somebody who can absolutely reproduce, the exact same motion beautifully. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are fascinated, like I am, with what Lionel Messi has done to appreciate soccer. How does he see the field that way? Okay, and create these plays that you're like, how does he do that? Okay. You wouldn't, anybody who says, okay, I'm going to watch a lot of Messi tapes and then I'm going to take my kid and make them a little messy, so to speak. Yes, you are going to make them, you're going to make them a lot messy. It doesn't work that way. You have to take the person where they are. You have a child doesn't get a set of instructions from the parents about this is the way I want you to walk. One of the things I realized about my therapy, but I think like a lot, we give a lot of instructions. Now, I want you to bring your foot forward, put your heel down, and blah, 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 blah. Kids figure it out on their own. Mm-hmm. And there's a good reason for that because the brain is a self-organizing organ. Be quiet a little. Set up the conditions, okay? Make the person reflective about what happened there. One of the things we would say to people is, tell us about what happened there. That looked really good. What do you think you were doing differently? How are they experiencing it? I'd say, boy, you're doing fine. And then you wobbled right in the middle. What did you do? And man, they were spot on, absolutely spot on in explaining their own motor behaviors. And you'd see them like trying like on weight shifting, in down moments, they'd be like, okay, can I get it over there? Can I get it over here? That's exactly what you want people to do, as opposed to, now I want you to bring your foot forward, hit with your heel. Now I want you to shift your weight, bend your knees slightly. It took me a while to learn to shut up, to put it bluntly. Yap. And do it my way. Do it the way I learned it from the textbook for normal gait. That's not the way to go. So I think that there are models. Why do people go to psychologists? Sometimes for deep problems. Sometimes because they just think their life can be better if they had insight into their behaviors. Or some people have a behavior they want and they want to know how to make it stronger. I was happy in the guide, which, by the way, I should say, I'm very proud of one fact. I am probably the only, in fact, I know I'm the only physical therapist who's worked on all 4 editions. And I'll just have to do the 5th without me, but I've had input. The guide does speak about movement as a behavior. Mm-hmm. I was on the first work group after movement was the movement system was supposed to be our identity. It was not necessarily the most productive experience from my point of view, but I was able to at least push the group, I thought, to recognize that movement's a behavior. So if it's a behavior, then my relationship to the patient changes dramatically, because I'm here to say, okay, what are your behaviors? What do you find less successful? How do we get you to be more successful? And some of that may be fixing the impairments. Yeah, I am still going to mobilize your ankle if you don't have range of motion, but I'm not stopping there. And what I see as a danger for what's happening is we do a great job correcting the impairment, and then they go to a Pilates instructor.
Right.
Or some other sort of, they go to a dance class or somebody else that they feel is offering that next level. That is so within our purview. And we could do a fabulous job because we could take them through that continuum.
Right. So, changing, we're talking about identity, right? So,
Yeah.
movement as our professional identity. I'm not thrilled with that. I don't think you are either. And I know a lot of therapists aren't. But as you're saying, movement is a behavior. Okay. Well, if we start to let the idea go a little bit that we treat impairments, right? So we kind of move away from the biomechanist, pathology-oriented view, right? And we say movement's a behavior. Okay. Well, then that must mean that in some way, I'm a behavioral therapist, but I work in a sub-niche, or I work in a niche of behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, because we obviously keep thoughts in mind, right?
Yes.
But I work with how someone moves or how they feel or how they relate or how they perceive their body, basically. That's a totally different conversation than a lot of people in our profession are probably having right now around what is our professional identity.
I couldn't agree with you more that it's not the conversation that people are having, although some are. I think you're starting to see this. I think it's the conversation that we should have, because I think there are two problems. One is, if impairments did the trick, we would have fabulous success as physical therapists. Yeah. And we have good success. I don't want to knock what we do. It's not bad. It's good. But could it be better if we rethought it some? And I think the answer is yes. And so 45 years, almost half a century living in this impairment-based paradigm. And the sad fact is, what's going on in the clinic in my 45th year is not that much different than my first year. Okay. I've worked with some brilliant therapists. I've worked in some terrific places. I've learned a lot for 45 years from certainly my early days. But if the paradigm was going to work, the magic would have happened by now. And we know that we get them so far, but we don't get them that next bit. And they are turning to other people. Yeah. So we are approaching by mid-century, because I think we will either break out of the box or be totally boxed in as fixer-treaters or sort of, coaches and guides. And I would hope we would go. I think people would find it more satisfying. How often can you derive great professional satisfaction from mobilizing a knee, or doing the same straight plane exercises, or, handing out a piece of TheraBand? I think we have, if our eyes and our hands don't impact that movement, which is so essential to human existence, if we could tap into what we can do with that in a much more satisfying way for the therapists, we might have a little bit less burnout. You feel more connected to a person rather than, boy, I just fixed a great body part, like I just changed the spark plugs. Right. It's hard to get really excited. Maybe necessary, but it doesn't make you really excited forever.
No, and the literature backs it up that when you place clinicians in environments where they don't have the flexibility to learn new things or to try new things, it's a formula for burnout.
Right. Well, and some of the therapeutic effect is the patient-therapist interaction itself. We cannot ignore that. And if we cut ourselves off from that, and again, people misinterpret that as, I'm going to get too close and it's an emotional relationship and that's going to be It's connected to emotions, but it's not any of the things that immediately come to mind.
Right.
It's really capturing people as people in their lived experience as they experience it. And you're adding your professional insight, suggestion, maybe a little bit of direction if that's what they're looking for, but it's a connection that you feel. And that's why, people go see psychologists. A model, a very successful model, and that's what they've chosen to do. Dentistry can just fix teeth and treat, and we're very grateful when we have a toothache for them to do that. But, a lot of them are getting into aesthetics and smiles and how that makes a person feel. Mm-hmm. Not many, but it's there. So if we went the dentistry model, we could be great fixers. Come to me and you got a body part out of whack and I'm going to fix it. I'm not sure that meets we're people, every PT student, I'm a people person, and that it's going to do the trick for the degree that we really are people persons. Are we willing to make connections? There's vulnerability there. That's going to make some people unhappy, but I think I've been fortunate. I hope I've given to patients, but I also think they have dramatically impacted my life for the ones that I've gotten to know, mm-hmm. that I've connected with. And I've been fortunate that there have been enough to make this have been a very rewarding and rich career. I would wish that for everybody, to learn from their patients, and not in an ooey gooey kind of emotional way, but really some fundamental truths about human existence, mm-hmm. and how they perceive life. And that to me is really one of the exciting things. And, we get to do it with our hands too. We are really physical. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's a very elemental way of interacting with people. It's rich if we let it be. And I'm afraid that we don't always let it be.
Andrew, I want to thank you for the rich conversation, because we've I think, taken the idea of what a physical therapist, that's what we are, right? Our identity is that we're a physical therapist. I think the beauty within that identity and the beauty within our profession has always been, you have the ability to create the professional identity that you want. If that means inserting more behavioral psychology or more cognitive behavioral therapy or more neuroscience or whatever it is, you have the ability to do that. Of course, a lot of that relies on you as the professional to say, hey, graduated, got my license, check that off. All right, now let me think about how am I going to plan my professional development so that I can now mold the self-identity that I want, that helps me and, of course, helps my patients. And I think that's the real key, is how do we start to motivate ourselves into saying, I'm smart. I have a doctorate degree, right? I went through 8 years of school, plus all the other things I've been through. Now I can take this body of knowledge and I can expand that. And it doesn't necessarily require a PhD to do that. There are lots of ways to do it. As a clinician, I've done that my whole career.
I would agree. It is interesting because we are the instrument of our profession. We are the tool. Our bodies are the tool, and our minds are part of that, obviously. And I think we shy away from realizing the power if we actually harness ourselves as the instruments we can be. We're frightened of that because it takes a fair amount of self-knowledge and a little bit of being fearsome to confront yourself. What kind of instrument? Again, something we don't often ask. Am I the right therapist for this patient?
Yeah.
Can I connect with them in meaningful ways? And we immediately go, well, I don't know how to fix or treat that problem. So I'll refer you to, my colleague over here because he does all the sacroiliac joints, and never like, I can't connect with you. We cannot develop a relationship where I can coach you to a higher level of performance. We're just not a match. Those kinds of questions, I think, if we were asking them more routinely, would suggest to me that we have progressed in 45 years, and we're not doing in my 45th year what we were doing in my first year. And I think that there is a sufficient number of people that if they felt that they weren't alone in the way that they were thinking, people would move to that. And actually, I think we all know people who have incredibly successful practices, doing fine, surviving. It's not a monetary challenge. They're doing fine in their practices, and their patients love them, and they are very satisfied as professionals. They just bring their A game to the situation.
Andrew, it's been great speaking with you. I know that there's going to be people who are excited about the idea of moving away from the movement system and into, really more of a systems-based approach, which has happened throughout healthcare, to be honest, not just in physical therapy. And then there are going to be some people who feel like we need to own something, and the movement system is the one thing we own, which technically we don't own movement, of course, but that's going to be out there. If people want to get in touch with you and thank you, or, maybe challenge you a little bit, how can people learn about you and follow some of your work?
Things get put up on ResearchGate, but I'm happy. I'll publicly, unless you tell me not to, I'll give you my email address. And I don't know if I should say it or just send it to you. And
we'll link to it in the show notes.
Okay. Yes. No, I'm happy to hear from people. One of the joys of being retired, more or less, although I still find myself doing things, is that you can actually look forward to email and not feel like, how am I going to get this done and everything else done? It's a real joy to be you can connect with the world in ways that maybe work interferes with. So I'm very happy to connect with people if they'd like. And there's a lot more that can be talked about for sure.
I appreciate everything that you've done for our profession. I think your work
thank you.
Is, it's a tremendous foundation for people who are interested in looking at this topic, obviously. I read about it in the PT guide, which I went in there to read about things related to, can we diagnose as therapists? Is diagnosis part of our practice act? And the truth is it is. How we then apply that is what we're really kind of talking about here today. But if you're listening to this episode, I encourage you to share this with your friends and family. And of course, your physical therapy colleagues who are interested in the topic of the movement system, or maybe moving away from the movement system, as we spoke about here today. And I'm interested in your feedback. So you can, of course, email me. A lot of you are on my email list. If you're not, hop on over to the Integrative Pain Science Institute and just go to the newsletter, and you can sign up there, or you can find me on Instagram. My handle is @DrJoeTatta. It's been a pleasure being here with you this week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Healing Pain Podcast with Dr. Joe Tatta. To subscribe to the podcast and learn more, visit integrativepainscienceinstitute.com. That's Integrative Pain Science Institute.com. Sign up to receive weekly updates, leave a review on iTunes, and share this episode with your friends.